They say the mountain speaks in silence. When the wind brushes through the pine trees and carries snow across the high ridges, it murmurs stories only the quiet ones can hear. Emily Harper, 22, had listened to those whispers since she was a child. Living at the edge of the small village of Briar Glen, where the gravel path turns to dirt and the trees grow thick, Emily shared a modest cabin with her grandmother, Martha, who hadn't heard a sound since she was 6 years old. Silence was Emily's first language. She'd grown up signing to express joy, fear, hope, hands becoming wings for the words her heart couldn't speak. Even now, her fingers moved as she thought, as if her thoughts themselves needed translation. While others in town filled silence with noise, Emily found peace in stillness, in the quiet rustle of pine needles, the crunch of snow under boots, the creak of their wooden porch. She woke before the sun that morning. The air was crisp, the fire in the stove fading to embers. Her grandmother slept in the next room, wrapped in quilts Emily had sewn herself. Carefully, Emily layered her woolen clothes, pulled on her boots, and stepped into the early light. Outside, the world was painted in soft whites and blues. She walked toward the woods, basket in hand, seeking winter herbs that still clung to life beneath patches of snow. Every breath she took turned to mist. Birds didn't sing this high on the ridge, but the mountain always felt alive to her, breathing, watching, waiting. As she moved through the frost-covered underbrush, she paused beside a fallen tree. Her hand touched its bark, and she closed her eyes. The wind picked up gently, curling around her like a shawl. For a moment, she imagined the mountain whispering again, not in words, but in a hush that reached deeper than sound. Her grandmother once told her, "Those who listen with their hearts can hear what the world forgets to say." Emily had always believed that, and though she had grown used to being overlooked, quiet, strange, too reserved, she knew her place wasn't in the noise. It was here, among the trees, the snow, and the silence. What she didn't know was that the mountain was about to speak louder than ever before. Emily's world moved at the pace of patience. Each morning, after her walk through the woods, she returned to the cabin with her basket half filled. Pine needles, dried lavender, roots for tea. The small village of Briar Glen relied on her knowledge of herbs, passed down from her grandmother's hands to hers. Like a sacred language, she prepared tinctures for coughs, ointments for burns, even oils for anxiety. People came for her remedies, but they never stayed long. They called her kind, but strange, too quiet, too other. She didn't mind. Inside the cabin, warm light filtered through linen curtains, casting pale gold across the wooden floor. The walls were lined with shelves of dried plants and glass bottles. Her grandmother, Martha, sat near the fire, gently sewing by the window. They communicated in signs, swift, fluid, intimate. A glance was often enough. A flicker of fingers across a wrist meant hunger. A tilt of the head and 2 blinks. Worry. Their conversations were more vivid than any spoken words. That afternoon, Emily prepared salves at the table. She moved with care, crushing dried calendula petals into a stone mortar, adding beeswax over low flame. Her hands worked from memory, rhythmic and sure. Outside, the trees bent gently in the breeze. Snow drifted past the window, slow and weightless. She glanced at a faded photograph pinned above the hearth. A much younger Martha stood beside a tall man in uniform. Emily's grandfather, long gone now. Her grandmother never spoke of him, but sometimes Emily would find her tracing the edge of the photo in the early morning light, eyes distant, remembering something only silence could hold. Later, Emily walked to town. The streets of Briar Glen were quiet in winter, dusted with snow and lined with lampposts wrapped in pine garlands. She stopped by the grocer, signed a soft thank you to the cashier, and continued on. People greeted her kindly, but didn't linger. She didn't expect them to. At the edge of the square was the tiny library where she volunteered twice a week. There, in the warmth of old books and quiet corners, she taught signs to children. Just the basics, colors and animals, fingers spelling their names. Most came out of curiosity. A few stayed. Her favorite was Lena, a girl of 6 with a stutter and wide, wondering eyes. For Lena, the language of hands felt like magic. As dusk approached, Emily made her way back home, the world softening under a pale lavender sky. She carried a book under one arm, her breath curling in front of her like invisible lace. This life, this simple, gentle rhythm, was hers. It didn't dazzle or roar, but it was enough. It held quiet purpose. And yet, high on the mountain, something waited. Something cold, broken and silent in its own way. It had no voice, but soon it would need hers. The next morning came wrapped in fog. A low silver mist clung to the trees as Emily stepped beyond the porch, basket in hand. The usual hush of the forest felt heavier somehow, denser. The snow crunched beneath her boots, soft and damp, as if the mountain were holding its breath. She moved slowly, instinctively quieter than usual. Her path led her deeper into the woods than normal, along the edge of a frozen stream that wound through the ridgeline like a sleeping vein. Emily knew these woods intimately, every bend, every boulder, every tree scarred by wind and time. But something was off. At first, it was only a dark shape through the fog. A mound where none should be. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Then her heart skipped. A man. He lay crumpled near the base of a pine, half covered in snow. One arm twisted unnaturally beneath him, his coat soaked through. For a split second, Emily froze. The world seemed suspended in that breath between fear and action. Then she dropped her basket and ran to him. He was unconscious, shivering violently. His skin was pale, lips cracked. Blood stained the sleeve of his jacket. Dark, but no longer fresh. She touched his forehead. Burning. She signed a soft question without thinking. "Are you hurt?" Of course, he didn't respond, but her hands moved anyway. No phone, no ID. His features were sharp beneath days of stubble. Early 30s, maybe. Strong jaw, hollow eyes that remained shut. His clothes were high quality, expensive but dirty, torn, completely out of place. She looked around, expecting to hear voices, to see someone searching. Nothing, just snow, trees, fog. Alone. Emily exhaled sharply. She needed to move. Now. With great effort, she hoisted one of his arms over her shoulders and half carried, half dragged him down the trail. Her boots slipped in the snow, but she didn't stop. Her lungs burned and her back ached. But she kept going. The cabin wasn't far, just past the bend, through the clearing. She reached it barely upright, muscles shaking. Her grandmother met her at the door, alarm flashing in her eyes. Emily signed quickly. "He's hurt. I found him in the woods." Together, they got him inside, laid him on the spare bed. Emily peeled away his wet jacket, checked for wounds. Nothing fatal, but bruised ribs, deep exhaustion, and exposure. She pressed a wet cloth to his head, changed his clothes, covered him with blankets. He didn't wake. She sat beside him long into the night, watching his chest rise and fall. No name, no voice, just a silence that echoed something buried deep within him. Emily didn't know who he was or what storm had brought him to her door. But something told her he hadn't just been lost in the forest. He was lost in himself. The man didn't speak for 3 days. He drifted in and out of fever, eyes fluttering beneath pale lids. Emily stayed close, tending to his wounds with the same care she gave her herbs. She bathed his forehead, changed his bandages, kept him warm. When he stirred, startled or tense, she'd gently place her hand over his and sign slowly. Not to communicate, but to comfort. Movement as language. Kindness without a word. Her grandmother observed quietly from across the room, as if she, too, recognized the silence that surrounded him wasn't ordinary. It was a different kind of quiet, a fractured space he'd fallen into, far from the reach of sound. On the 4th morning, his eyes opened fully. Emily was steeping tea by the stove when she noticed. He didn't speak, just watched her. His gaze was wary, but not panicked, curious, confused. She offered a gentle smile and moved slowly, bringing the mug to his side. He flinched as she approached, then calmed as she knelt beside him. She pointed to herself. "Emily," she signed. His brow furrowed. She tried again, this time slower, more patient. "My name is Emily." He blinked. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His throat moved, as if he wanted to speak, then closed. He looked away. Still, she smiled. She didn't press. That afternoon, she set up a small table by the window in his room, left a notebook and a pencil there. She pointed to it, then to him. An invitation, not a demand. He didn't touch it. But that evening, as the wind moaned outside and the fire cast flickering shadows on the cabin walls, she noticed he was watching her. Not with suspicion, but with quiet wonder. As she folded laundry or helped her grandmother cross the room, his eyes followed her movements. Slow, calm, intentional. The next day, she made him broth and placed it in his hands. He drank it. The day after, she handed him a worn copy of The Secret Garden. He turned the pages slowly, even if his eyes didn't follow the words. She never asked who he was. She never asked why he didn't speak. She simply made space for him to exist. Then, one night, as snow fell softly against the windows, she brought in a stray kitten she'd found curled beneath the porch. Small, black, trembling. She held it up, grinning, and signed Cat. The little creature meowed weakly. A sound. The man tensed. Emily froze. Then he laughed. It wasn't a real laugh, not yet. But the corners of his mouth twitched. His eyes softened. And for the first time, something flickered there. Life. Emily handed him the kitten, and to her surprise, he accepted it, holding it clumsily against his chest. His shoulders relaxed. She signed again, slowly. Cat. He hesitated, then lifted one trembling hand and repeated the motion. A sign. Not a word, but a beginning. From that moment, the silence between them shifted. It was no longer hollow. It was shared. In the days that followed, they sat together more often, drank tea, watched the trees sway in the wind. He began mimicking her signs, not perfectly, but with growing ease. She never corrected him. She only encouraged. No name, no voice, but every gesture, every small smile felt louder than words. Snow melted slowly that week, trickling down from the eaves and softening the forest floor. The worst of winter was fading, but inside the cabin, the quiet between Emily and the stranger deepened. Not with distance, but with closeness. He still hadn't spoken. Not a single word. But he didn't need to. Every morning, Emily found him sitting by the window, watching the trees with a kind of reverence she recognized, the kind that only comes from someone who's lost too much to take the world for granted. They developed a rhythm, soft, subtle. She would bring him tea, and he would accept it with a nod. She'd point to something, book, sun, bird, and he'd attempt the sign, slowly, clumsily. Often he'd watch her hands with quiet awe, as if they were casting some ancient, invisible spell. One evening, after dinner, Emily sat with her journal on the floor, sketching wildflowers from memory. The man, he still hadn't shared his name, watched her for a long moment before picking up the notebook she'd left on the table days ago. He opened it and began to write. His handwriting was neat but unsure. "I forgot how to talk." Emily read it once, then again. She looked up, but he wasn't watching her. His eyes were on the fire. She turned the page and wrote beneath it, "It's okay. You're still speaking." He smiled, just a flicker, but it lit something behind his eyes. Later, she told him about her dream, signed slowly, letting her hands paint it in the air. A school, for kids like my grandmother, where hands speak louder than mouths, where silence isn't a burden, it's a gift. He watched her hands move, his eyes following every curve, every pause. Then, carefully, he repeated the word, school. Not perfectly, but with intention. That night, as she prepared for bed, she found a new note tucked beneath her book. "I don't know who I am right now, but you make it easier not to run." Emily pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. The next morning, they walked outside for the first time together. Slowly, carefully, she led him along the same path where she'd found him. Though neither of them spoke of that day, he paused near the fallen tree, looking at it as if seeing a ghost, then turned to her with a look that said more than words ever could. "Thank you." And she smiled back, not with her lips, but with her whole being. Because when words are missing, the heart finds another way. The morning began like any other. Soft light filtered through the curtains, the smell of pine smoke lingered from the fire, and Emily stirred the tea with quiet focus. She smiled to herself, expecting to hear the gentle shuffle of footsteps from the room down the hall. Lately, he had been rising earlier, watching the birds from the porch wrapped in Martha's old knitted blanket. But the cabin was silent. She walked to his room, knocked lightly, then pushed the door open. Empty. The bed was neatly made, the fire in the hearth cold. The notebook she'd left on the side table was gone. Her breath caught. She turned in slow circles, searching for a sign he might be outside, gathering kindling, or sitting in the shed. But the porch was empty. No footprints in the new snow, no lingering warmth in the teacup by the window. Just gone. Panic surged, hot and bitter. She checked the woods, calling out with her hands, her arms, even her voice, though it felt strange in her throat. But the only reply was the wind. Back inside, something caught her eye on the small table near the door, a single piece of folded paper. She opened it with trembling fingers. Drawn carefully in pencil were two hands, shaped into the sign for "Thank you." No words, just that. The corners of her eyes burned. She pressed the drawing to her lips, then held it to her chest. He had left the same way he came, quiet, broken, wrapped in mystery. But he hadn't left without saying goodbye. Martha watched her from the kitchen, her weathered eyes filled with knowing. Emily signed slowly, voice trembling through her fingers. He was never meant to stay. Her grandmother reached for her hand, gave it a soft squeeze. No words were needed between them. Emily sat by the window the rest of the day, watching the trees bend in the wind. She didn't cry. Instead, she breathed in the silence, held the weight of it, and let it settle. Something had changed. A new space had opened inside her. Part grief, part wonder. She didn't know where he had gone, but deep down, she believed he would remember her hands. And somehow, some way, the silence would bring him back. Spring crept into Briar Glen with shy blossoms and muddy trails. The snow receded from the edges of the forest, and for the first time in months, color returned. Soft greens, bright buds, the hopeful chirp of birds returned from wherever they'd gone to escape the cold. Emily felt it too, a shift, not just in the weather, but in the air itself. Change had come. It started with strangers in town, 2 men and a woman in tailored coats and clean boots, walking the perimeter of the old sawmill at the edge of the village. They asked questions, took notes, spoke with the mayor. Emily watched from the grocery store window, basket in hand. The villagers murmured. Outsiders were rare here. Visitors were rarer. Within days, a notice appeared on the town bulletin board. The Glen Foundation is proud to announce the development of a new inclusive education center, focused on accessibility and community connection. Construction begins this summer. The flyer was stamped with an unfamiliar logo, a stylized mountain range cradling a small hand. Emily stared at it for a long time. That night, she traced the same hand symbol on paper, fingers trembling. 2 weeks later, she received a visit at the library. A soft-spoken woman introduced herself as Clara Dawson, a representative from the Glen Foundation. "We've heard of your work," she said, smiling. "Your signing lessons with the children, your herbal practice, your connection to the community. We'd love your help." Emily blinked, unsure. "As an interpreter," Clara clarified, "and as someone who understands what it means to be heard, without ever needing to speak." For a moment, Emily could only nod. Her heart beat loudly in her chest. She signed a slow yes, and Clara's eyes lit up. Later that evening, Emily stood at the edge of the ridge near her cabin, looking out over the distant town. The breeze moved gently through her hair. The mountain whispered again, in the way only she could hear. He was gone, but something of him had stayed behind, something real, something powerful. And now, it was blooming. The whole town gathered that morning, children in pressed shirts, elders wrapped in wool shawls, families holding hands beneath a bright blue sky. Balloons swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of soft music floated from speakers on the new school's porch. The building stood tall and proud, modern, warm, and filled with windows that caught the sun just right. A large banner arched across the entrance. Briar Glen Center for Inclusive Learning. Emily stood near the edge of the crowd, fingers nervously woven together. She wore a soft green dress and had tucked a sprig of lavender behind her ear, something her grandmother used to do for strength. Clara Dawson approached the microphone, smiling brightly. "Today," she said, "we welcome not only a new beginning for Briar Glen, but a new way of seeing the world, through every voice, every hand, every heart." Polite applause followed. Then Clara paused. And now, the man who made this vision possible, whose generosity and personal journey shaped every inch of this dream. Emily's breath caught. Clara turned. "Please welcome Mr. Michael Carter." The crowd stirred. A few people gasped. Michael Carter, the tech billionaire who vanished 2 years ago after his wife and daughter were killed in a plane crash. Rumors had swirled, breakdowns, disappearances, death. But no one had ever found him. Until now. Emily's eyes locked on the man walking across the stage. He was different, not just in the cleaner suit or trimmed beard, but in the way he moved. Calm, grounded. His eyes swept across the crowd, gentle and steady. Then, without a word, he raised his hands and began to sign. I lost everything once. My voice, my purpose, my will to exist. The interpreter beside him echoed the signs in words, but many in the audience watched only him. His hands moved with clarity and grace. But then, a stranger found me. A woman who spoke not with sound, but with kindness, who reminded me that even in silence, we are never truly alone. The crowd was hushed. Some cried. Emily stood frozen. The wind brushed her cheek. Her heart thundered in her chest. He hadn't forgotten. And as his eyes found hers in the crowd, soft, steady, full of unspoken recognition, she knew. Michael Carter had come back, not just to the world, but to her. The applause faded slowly, replaced by music and movement, as families entered the new school, exploring classrooms and chatting in small, excited groups. But Emily remained outside, standing quietly beneath a blooming dogwood tree near the back garden. She needed a moment to breathe, to think, to believe. The gravel crunched softly behind her. She turned. Michael stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of his charcoal gray coat. Eyes gentler now, brighter. His expression was unsure, vulnerable, like he wasn't entirely convinced she'd want to see him. But she did. They didn't speak. Neither reached for words. It wasn't necessary. He took a slow step forward. Emily met him halfway. For a moment, they just stood there. Two people once lost in their own silences, now standing in the middle of something wordless, but full. Michael raised his hands slowly. I didn't know how to say goodbye. Emily's throat tightened. Her fingers moved gently. You didn't have to. I heard you. He smiled. That quiet smile she remembered, the one that only showed when he wasn't thinking, when something real surfaced through all the weight. Then he signed again, this time with care, with deliberation. You saved me. And now, I want you to help me save others. From the inner pocket of his coat, he pulled a slim folder. Inside were plans, outlines, blueprints. Her name already appeared on several pages. Emily Hart, Director of Communication and Language Integration. Her eyes widened. He stepped closer, offering the folder like a fragile gift. She didn't take it right away. Instead, she looked into his eyes, searching for hesitation, for performance, for regret. She found none, only hope. Her hands rose. Yes, but only if we build it the right way, with both our voices. He nodded, almost relieved. Then, slowly, gently, he extended his hand. She took it. And in that single, silent moment, the past and future touched. No promises were spoken. No tears were shed. But the connection was undeniable, deeper than words, louder than sound. Together, they stood beneath the tree, hand in hand, as petals drifted around them like snow returning to the earth. A new beginning, born from silence. Laughter filled the halls, not loud, not voiced, but radiant, vibrant, alive. Small hands danced through the air in swift, excited motion. Children signed to one another with joy, fingers flying, eyes bright, giggles shared in silence that somehow felt louder than words ever could. The Briar Glen Center pulsed with life. In one of the sunlit classrooms, Emily moved between desks, her expression calm and focused, yet glowing with something deeper. Purpose. She knelt beside a young girl struggling with a sign and gently guided her hand. letting their fingers move together like choreography. The girl smiled, tried again. This time, she got it right. Emily beamed. On the wall behind her desk, framed in smooth oak, hung the drawing, two hands forming the sign for "Thank you." Students asked about it often. She always told them the same thing, signing softly. It was the first voice I ever truly heard. Michael came most days, but he never stood at the front. He wandered quietly through the halls, a soft presence in the background, helping organize books, installing new equipment, planting flowers with the students. When the children signed to him, he responded slowly, carefully. He wasn't fluent yet, but he was listening, always listening. Sometimes, at lunch, Emily caught him watching her as she taught. Not with pride, with gratitude. The quiet kind that grows from knowing your life was reshaped by another's compassion. Martha visited on sunny afternoons. She'd sit near the garden and read stories aloud while students sat at her feet, many watching her hands more than her lips. The school blossomed, not because of grandeur or funding or fame, but because it was built from something invisible, something strong, connection. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves drifted past the windows, Emily stood by the large classroom window, watching her students sign to one another beneath the trees. A soft voice, the narrator of her soul, rose inside her, like a whisper that had waited a long time to be heard. Sometimes, silence is the greatest shelter. She placed her hand gently over her heart and smiled. And the language of love, the quietest of all. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more emotional and inspiring tales like this one. I'd love to hear what part resonated with you most. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your feedback helps bring these stories to life.